guys, this is gonna be a guide on how to play Bossk Blue. So last week Jordan won Spain Planetary Qualifier, so I thought it might be a cool idea to show this deck on the channel. And yeah, you can see, I'll post the link to the whole event in the description of the video, so you can check other decks out and how other players did. From the interesting things, I believe Cat Red was a deck that did quite well, and it is the type of deck that at least I wasn't expecting at all to do as well as it did. So yeah. Coming back to the Bossk Blue, so this one is a set 2 version of the hard control that we could have seen in set 1. So there was stuff like Vader Blue, Iden Red, and to some extent Boba Blue. And those decks were really oriented about playing a lot of removal and late game cards, stuff like Avengers to finish the opponent off. And yeah, in the second set we have another version of this deck. This is gonna be a Bossk Blue, so the deck that utilizes a lot of bounties in order to draw cards and get a lot of value cheaply. So in the very first set, the hard control was kind of struggling in terms of card draw. Like the best option you had there was I'm Your Father, and with I'm Your Father, the thing was that your opponent could just say yes, and then that I'm Your Father would deal 7 damage, and you wouldn't get any cards. And in a lot of cases, that was a better option for your opponent if the target wasn't a high priority. So yeah, this is how the deck looks, and let's get right into this. So for our early game, we have Dr. Pershing, Client, and Chalsen. Pershing is our turn 1 play. He's pretty good in card control because he allows you to essentially draw more cards, which is a thing that you really need as card control because you can easily run out of cards. So you can play Pershing on turn 1. And the cool thing about him is the fact that very few decks, if any, can kill Pershing on turn 1. So you're basically guaranteed to be able to use his ability. And if you manage to use it like 2 or 3 times or even more, then that's a lot of value because you get so much cards that you'll have a lot of versatility with the removal that you can play in each round. So that's a lot of value. And even if the opponent just tries to kill him, like for the most part, the opponent units are gonna have like 3 damage, so they won't be even able to kill him in one shot. So you can use his ability in those cases once or twice, even so. Pershing is quite good in this type of deck. Nextly, we have Client, so more a unit that is very synergistic with Bossk because he gives a unit bounty that allows your base to heal for 5 HP. So this one is very important because healing in general gives much more survivability to hard control decks, and it was really crucial in the first set and is also very important in this one. The also cool thing about giving bounty of clients is the fact that Bossk as a leader can ping a unit for one damage each round, basically for free. And then when Bossk deploys, you can collect the very first bounty twice. So that's a lot of value, and with Client you can heal your base for 10, which is a lot for sure. Nextly we have Chalsen, so a card that on paper looks as a 4 cost 2/2, which seems terrible, but when you play him you can reveal up to 4 blue cards from your hand, and you give him experience for each one of them. So yeah, giving information to your opponent is not ideal, but basically in a lot of cases he is 6/6 for 4 with Sentinel, which is incredibly strong stat line and really helps you to stabilize the game against aggro, especially. So in this deck you have a lot of blue cards, not as many as in the first set, I believe. Like I think Vader Blue and Iden Red were running more blue cards in the very first set, but this time around you have more draw power with stuff like Pershing and Deathmark. So that makes drawing and having 3 or 4 blue cards in your hand is easier. Also, one of the things with Charleston in the first set was that if you want to make him a 6/6, you have to skip the turn 1 play because you otherwise won't be able to have four cards in your hand. But this time around you have Pershing, which you can play on the first round, and because he draws you a card, you still will be able to have those 4 cards for the Charleston, which is nice synergy over here. Okay, next we have removal. So this deck is all about removal. There is a lot of it. So we have Force Choke. Force Choke is mostly to be used against very aggressive decks. So primarily Sabine, which is a really strong deck in the meta. This event allows you to one-shot Sabine essentially. Also can kill something like Battlefield Marine or Sabine Ruan, which can be buffed by Wing Leader, because then they are at 5 HP and Force Choke can still kill them. Force Choke is basically very cheap, only 2 resources for dealing 5 damage is a lot. It has a downside of not being able to target space units, I mean vehicles in general, which are basically all of the spaceships, and also the fact that your opponent gets to draw a card, which is also not ideal. But yeah, for the cheap price that it gives a lot of value. Nextly we have Make an Opening. So this one allows you to kill some units that are shielded, so namely something like Subplate Defender, Crafty Smuggler, maybe L3. So there are a few cards that have shielded, which Make an Opening can kill easily, and also allows you to heal your base for 2, which is nice. And also it can just finish off some low HP targets. Next we have more removal, so Open Fire, just a casual 4 damage for 3 resources. Part of the Dark Side, which is a great removal. This one allows you to force your opponent to destroy one of their units, and it can kill leaders, so this one is a very strong removal. Just make sure that your opponent doesn't have any like very cheap units that they can sacrifice easily, something like 1 or 2 drop. Try to kill something that costs 3 or more if possible. Next we have some removal for the top end. So for the Dragon, this one allows you to kill a non-leader unit that has 5 or more power. So this one allows you to kill high threat targets, so stuff like Fire Spray, Avengers, Great Dragons, and so on. Takedown, this one's also as just a straightforward removal that allows you to kill a unit that has 5 or less remaining HP. Vigilance in this deck costs 6, but it gives you so much value that it's worth playing it even for the bigger price. So with this one, the 2 primary modes you want to use are healing for 5 and defeating a unit with 3 or less HP, and most of the time that's a really strong options. Discarding 6 is really good also if you play against control decks, so stuff like Kira. In those cases, discarding 6 is also very powerful and probably the strongest things that you can do with the Vigilance. There is also a shield option. Shield option is probably the least desirable with this one, but it's still not bad. Like you can use it to give a shield token to your leader, Great Dragon, or Avenger, or whatever. So sometimes the shield token is nice if your opponent doesn't have any ways to deal with them. Next we have Rival's Fall, a 6 cost removal that can kill basically anything. So this one is really expensive, but you can kill anything without any limitations. So it can kill primarily Boba Fett with armor, because a lot of decks kind of struggle to do that. Like in order to use Power of the Dark Side on Boba Fett, your opponent has to have no units at all. So this one can easily do that. Also, it can kill basically any big stuff as well as some smaller stuff that has maybe not enough power for Fel the Dragon to kill it. It's just a one-off, but it's sometimes nice. And there is the Super Laser Blast. This is the card that is very important for this deck because with this one, you can a lot of times just stall the game up to the 8 resources and then play the Super Laser Blast, kill everything, and in most cases your opponent is gonna have just more units, so you kill all of them and you get a lot of value. And with the cool thing about card control is the fact that because you have blast, you can a lot of times just not deploy your leader on 5, wait for the blast to clear everything, and then you can deploy your leader and get some value out of that because you have your leader and the opponent doesn't have any units or has like maybe 1 or 2. So the blast is a very important part of the hard control archetype. Nextly, we have some utility cards. So 2 bounties to target. This one costs only 1, and attach unit against bounty, heal 4 or 6 if it's a unique unit. So this one is just gives you healing and also is a bounty, so you can ping that unit with Bossk. That's one of the reasons why Bossk is quite good control leader, because you get access to quite a lot of healing for quite cheap price. Also, when you deploy Bossk, you can collect this twice. Nextly, we have Deathmark, so a card that allows you to draw 2 cards when you kill that target. This one is slightly more expensive, but as I said before, drawing cards is quite important when you play hard control, so this one is quite strong. And again, you get the option to collect it twice or just ping the unit off with Bossk before he deploys. Nextly, we have Entrench, so a card that was also a very key part of hard control in the very first set. Entrench is mostly utilized to play it on your opponent. So you play it before 8 resources just to stall the game. Like this card basically, if you think about it, you can play it like, let's say your opponent plays something like A-Wing, then plays a Wing Leader on that A-Wing. You can play Entrench on that A-Wing, and you basically don't play any ships in early game into space at all. So you basically kill that A-Wing in a way. Like sure, your opponent can play something like upgrade removal, but this one is just so cheap that it's really strong. Also, we can play it on leaders, and with all of those things combined, you can just stall the game to the point where you play the Super Laser Blast, you clear everything, and then you start playing your units and finish the game off that way. So this one is quite cheap. Next, we have Pillage. Pillage is quite interesting card because it's not a removal, but with so many decks that tend to play more than one card with the current meta, Pillage is quite strong. Like there is both versions of Hans and some other decks. Like if you play against hard control, like let's say you aggro, in a lot of cases you might think that playing a lot of units and trying to kill your opponent very quickly is the best way to finish your opponent off. But then if you play so many of cards, maybe your opponent can play Pillage, and as a hard control you can play Pillage, and in those cases maybe you can blank a whole turn from the aggro player, which is a lot of value. And also, if you play against more slower decks, it's still quite strong because in later stages of the game, resources don't matter as much, and this card basically gives you a 2-for-1 in a way. So when you play in a slower matchup, this one is also quite strong. And yeah, besides Han, we have obviously stuff like Yellow Boba, which is also a quite popular deck, and because of how many resources Boba has, discarding cards from his hand is also quite strong. Next, we have Restock. I believe this is just a one-off in this deck. So Restock is mainly for the control deck, so if you play against Kira or whatever, if they have Vigilances, the games tend to end by discarding, by who discards the opponent decks first, and Restocks basically allows you to mitigate that option from your opponent, because you can Restock can restock itself, so it makes milling you way harder for the opponent control deck, so it's quite strong in those cases. Okay, and we have late game now. So Palpatine, Avenger, and Great Dragon. Palpatine is not a late game. He's a late game card, but he's not a finisher. Like when you play him, he deals some damage. He doesn't give you as much of a stat line for 8 costs, but he's quite strong late game option. He can work as a pseudo laser. Like in a lot of cases, 6 damage is enough to kill most of the opponent units on 8 resources, if not all of them, so that's also a pretty good option. And as our finishers, we have Avenger, so a card that when you play him on attack, he forces your opponent to kill one of his non-leader units. So basically the same effect as Power of the Dark Side, with the exceptions that the opponent can't choose a leader. And Great Dragon, which is also a great finisher. Whenever your opponent plays a card when you have Great Dragon on board, you either deal the damage that the card costs to that player's base or to one of their grunt units. So Great Dragon is also a really strong finishers, and is how you want to finish the game off in most cases with the Avenger and Great Dragon. So for the sideboard, we have a few things. For the more aggressive matchups, we have another copy of Top Target. I believe in the main deck we have two, and one is in sideboard. There are Punishing Ones. Punishing Ones also help you against aggro, and also basically against any decks that have some cheap ships, because if your opponent plays something like A-Wing, Red 3, or whatever, you can play the Punishing One, and Punishing One has quite a strong stat line for a free cost that he can, in most cases, kill something, and then he's gonna still stay alive because 4 HP is enough to withstand most of the cheap ship attacks. When an enemy upgraded unit is defeated, you may ready Punishing One is also a nice thing in some matchups, but I feel like the main use case is just to kill the ships that have the early game ships, so stuff like Red 3 and A-Wing, as I mentioned before. We have more copies of Fall the Dragon and Rival's Fall for the matchups when you play against more control decks. For Surrender, this one is also quite strong when you play against slower matchups. In this deck, it's not as strong as it was with something like Vader Blue, because in Vader Blue you could get the benefit of discarding 2 cards way easier, because in order to force your opponent to discard 2 cards, you have to first deal at least 1 damage to that player's base, and with Vader it was way easier because Vader's ability allows you to ping the enemy base for 1. With Bossk it's slightly harder, but it's still a nice option to play in those slower matchups, especially in those where discarding cards really matters. There is one more copy of Great Dragon, and also Spark of Rebellion. Spark of Rebellion is also for the controlling matchups. So when you play against another controlling decks that have Vigilances, you can play Spark of Rebellion for 6 and discard the Vigilance, and even though you pay for the Spark of Rebellion 6 resources, it's still a great option to get rid of the opponent Vigilances and whatever the biggest threat is at the moment. Maybe they have restock or whatever. So this is how the deck looks, and yeah. Some final thoughts about the blue Bossk in general is the fact that this is the very first deck that is really the hard control in the second set. And it doesn't surprise me that it took a little while for this deck to develop. Like control decks tend to need more time to like in order to build a proper hard control decks. You have to have a good understanding of the meta and which removal is gonna be the strongest and what you need in general. So it took a little while, but we started to see some control decks. In the future, maybe we are gonna see more of them. I believe the yellow color, the yellow villainy has a lot of potential for being a really strong control decks, because there you have with that deck you have access to Bounty Hunter's Crew, Bazine, and Spark of Rebellion for only 4 resources, and also some other cool things like Carbonite, maybe Beckett, but those that I mentioned at first were the most important, like Bazine and Bounty Hunter's Crew, because they allow you to control. Bazine allows you to control the opponent's hands way easier, so you can get rid of the biggest threats, and the Bounty Hunter's Crew allows you to have essentially an infinite loop with your cards with your events. Like you can play Bounty Hunter's Crew in order to bring Restock, Vigilance, or whatever you need at the moment. So I don't know if Bossk, how well Bossk is gonna do into those decks, because I think something like Item Blue or Boba Blue is gonna have a favorite matchup in this situation, but we haven't seen any of those so far, and Bossk Blue seems to be doing really well in the current environment with stuff like Kira, Sabine, and all of that stuff, maybe Han Blue, and yeah. So that's it for the video, and see you next time, guys.